divorced. And as a young little third grader, I was so confused, wondering what had happened to my perfect family of 4, not to forget my 3 dogs. My parents had been fighting for a couple years, but as any kid would assume, I thought that in a matter of days, everything would return back to normal. My clearly realistic prediction ended up being wrong, as you might have already guessed. When my parents officially filed for divorce, I was too young and too unaware to be involved with any of the legal ordeals at the time. As I began to grow up, seeing both my parents' personalities, I started to learn the truth behind my parents' divorce. There are many scenarios that we don't have time to get into right now of how my mom's position had become a lot clearer to me. I started to realize more and more of how the situation with my dad was not only not normal, but not healthy. After every weekend that I would spend with my dad, I would always go back to my mom, telling her all the events that had happened over the past few days. It soon got to a point where I did not want to be with my dad anymore, so the courts once again came into play. This time, as a middle schooler, I was much more involved in what was happening and was interviewed by social workers, therapists, lawyers, and even a judge, thinking that surely one of these people had to listen to me and make a change. These interviews became increasingly frustrating because it felt like no matter what I said, no one would truly listen to me. This custody struggle went on for more years than it needed to, and it was not only a waste of time, but extremely exhausting for not only me, but my brother and mom as well. It seemed like an endless row of court dates, therapist meetings, calls with my lawyer, and even though I attribute many of these events to growing me into the person I am today, nonetheless, it was tiring going into countless meetings with professionals who claimed they would be able to make my voice heard, but were never able to live up to that promise. In multiple scenarios, me and my brother's views were seen as naive and not valid because we were simply too young to know what was best for ourselves. We were viewed as exaggerating the truth or that we were being manipulated by our parents. And while I do agree that a 12 to 10-year-old should not be making irrational decisions about their own lives, I do think there is a major difference between rational decisions and decisions that have been well thought out through many years of struggle. Many kids are not listened to in courts because they are too young to fully understand what is happening. 14 years old is considered the age where the court should listen to a child in custody cases. And even though at that age they can still be denied if the judge deems the request to be not in the child's best interest. Children are not unintelligent, and some might argue that kids get to see the best side of their parents. Parents are portrayed, especially when you're a kid, to be almost perfect and that they can never be wrong. So if a little kid is able to see the faults and toxic side of their parent, their opinion should be taken into consideration and not ignored because they are too young to understand the weight of the situation. A study done by the American Psychological Association found that when kids were involved in the custody process through mediation, which is defined as allowing both parents to come to a compromise presented by a mediator or someone in the middle, that process's success improved. I am not proposing that all divorces can be resolved by having a middleman decide what is best for the situation, but I am trying to demonstrate how a kid's voice and input is valuable, especially in situations like these. Mediation and the court system are indeed different, but ultimately, their end goal is the same: to create a solution that is, as has been phrased in the courts for many years, in the child's best interest. So if the child's input creates a greater success for that compromise, shouldn't they be allowed to voice it and have their opinions taken into consideration? As I mentioned earlier, my relationship with my dad had become unhealthy, and when I heard my friends talking about their relationship with their dad, I knew that my relationship was far from the stereotypical father-daughter relationship. As I became increasingly involved in the court aspect of my parents' divorce, I began to realize how the court strongly viewed that what was in the child's best interest was to have a relationship with both their parents. I do agree that having a relationship with both your parents is very important, but if that relationship is being forced by a foreign group, is that really healthy? Is that teaching kids to value their relationship with their parents, or is it teaching them that being involved in toxic relationships is okay? I'm well aware of the stereotype of daddy issues, and I think that it is no coincidence that many girls with divorced parents have daddy issues, because many of them are being forced to maintain an unhealthy relationship with their dad. If you are in a toxic friendship, you would not be encouraged to maintain that relationship. You would be told to distance yourself from that friendship, to be more mindful of how that friend acted towards you. Unfortunately, this is not the case in many court situations. Instead of having an influential voice where kids would be able to voice their opinion, kids are simply being forced into toxic relationships without the ability to distance themselves from it. While most teens will not have to deal with these types of situations, it is still equally as important to remember the value of young voices and the value and uniqueness it might hold. A study done by Berkeley highlights how kids are often better at problem solving than adults because they're driven to learn and are not task-oriented. Given this, it is hard to believe why kids' voices are not at least considered more often than they already are. Now, I'm not very confident that a 5-year-old will be able to solve our nation's greatest issues, but why don't we value kids with experience to give their input on issues involving their lives? Instead of just disregarding their opinions and ideas, why don't we at least consider them? After years and years of custody battles, I finally found my voice and was able to speak up for myself, unafraid of the opinions of others, speaking my opinion and what I felt was right for myself. Thanks to the Lord, I no longer struggle with what seemed like an ongoing battle as I once did. My relationship with my dad has become better as I have grown older and am no longer forced into an unhealthy relationship. Through these experiences, I was able to find my voice. It is my true and sincere hope that not only will kids not have to go through the events that I did to be able to gain a voice, but that their ideas and opinions will be taken into consideration more, and that they will grow up knowing that they can make a difference. Thank you, and God bless you.